Bom, pessoal, a gente está aqui com o Paul Gravett, que é um dos principais professores que estudam a questão dos quadrinhos. Eu vou fazer um pouco algumas perguntas para ele, para a gente tentar entender como é que fora do Brasil os professores têm se organizado para pesquisar os quadrinhos e tal. So, I would like you first of all, thank you very much for your time.
Sure, you're welcome.
And I would like you to tell me a bit about how you got as an academic that researches comics. That is, I don't know in other countries how it's felt, but here in Brazil we still have a lot of prejudice with the people that study these kind of things.
Yeah. Well, certainly in Britain there's prejudice as well. We have a similar history of many people despising comics and thinking they're unworthy of academic research. Currently we have a lot going on. We have 3 academic journals, peer-reviewed journals in the UK. But I'm very impressed with this journal, just because you've got so many people presenting papers. I've never actually been to a conference with quite this many papers presented. I've been to quite a few. So I'm impressed by the level of interest here. There's a real passion here for the subject. I should explain, I'm not actually an academic. I'm not affiliated with any university. I'm a free scholar. I'm studying, but I don't actually. I'm in that sense, I'm quite fluid and flexible. I move between the academic world and the public world of presenting comics to everybody, to the general public. And my interest is very much to try and bridge those two worlds, because we can learn so much about comics from academics, but sometimes the academic world can be a bit inward-looking and a bit cut off from everyday involvement. And I think people can get much more enjoyment from reading comics if they understand more about the language, the techniques, and the things that are hidden perhaps sometimes from view.
And you probably started to read comics when you are really, really young.
Yeah.
You still reading it, or you are just like more researching and more getting content? And what kind of things you are reading right now?
Yeah, I'm still reading, I'm still looking, I'm still exploring. I mean, right now I'm very immersed in Asian comics, not just manga, but trying to understand comics from countries that I can't read the language of, which is very, very frustrating. But I have got some amazing contacts in places like Thailand and Indonesia. Now, most of us know nothing about comics in Thailand or Indonesia, and they have got big cultures. They've got incredibly strange, crazy, pop culture, trashy comics like horror comics or whatever, and they also have exciting new comics coming through, graphic novels, and of course a big influence of manga on the current generation. And I'm trying to chart that material for a new book that is going to be about manga, but also in a bigger Asian context, to look at how it's affected, how it's been influenced, etc., the movement of manga around Asia. And I'm discovering some incredible things. I mean, things to think, why isn't this in English yet? Why isn't this in Portuguese yet, for example? Why isn't it known internationally? And my view is the history of comics is still very segmented, and there's obviously language is a huge barrier for getting people to discover more about comic cultures around the world. But we need to push more and more to have more openness, more translations, maybe online translations, so that people can discover the cultures of comics around the world and not just be thinking so much of maybe America and maybe just Japan. Because, you know, Asia is a country like Africa. There are many, many countries in Asia, and it's much more than just manga, much more.
And how you see nowadays the market of comics in UK? Mm-hmm. Like, there is a really, really growing of it, or you think that we're still with some good things and a lot of garbage? What do you think about it?
I think we're in a very good time. The main growth for the UK is not on the newsstands. We have, obviously, like you have here, lots of Marvel reprints and toy-related products and Disney kind of material up to a point. But the real growth in terms of market and sales, I think, is in the bookshops, it's in the comic shops, and with the graphic novels and with comics in book form is what is really taking off. And also, of course, the internet. That's having a huge impact in the UK. And the independent small press scene. That scene is discovering talent who are often generating their own products. They're getting Kickstarter funding to make beautiful books with support, which cuts out all of the usual process of publishing and publishers limiting what's made available. So it is a revolutionary time right now where there's more great stuff appearing, and I think the The challenge obviously still is to get across a message to a bigger public that it isn't, you haven't just got to buy the latest Marvel comic, much as we love Marvel comics, that it's so pushed at the public that all you hear about in the media is Ant-Man or whatever it might be, the next film that comes along, and it's hard for the alternative comics that are out here to get as much attention, to get much press, and that's really the challenge. I think is marketing and presenting people with the material. But when they discover it, and when there are events all the time like this, all kinds of outreach events to bring the new public in, people, when they see that the variety of comics, they're often absolutely amazed and become really excited and follow comics. I mean, one friend of mine said that comics, say in the UK certainly, is a bit like sushi. People aren't quite sure, but once they try it, they get hooked on it. So comics is the new sushi.
And you talked a bit about this revolution of how comics are presented. I got in contact with The Private Eye of Brian K. Vaughan. I don't know if you got this. It's a comic book that you can download for free, but you can pay if you want and how much you want. And it's totally online. You can. It's easily to get, and it's official. It's not like an official way to get it.
Right. Is that from America or where's it from?
It's from Vaughan, the American writer.
Okay.
And I would like to ask you, what are the ways you think comic will be from now on? Like, they will be more online, they will still have the press things or not?
I guess we will still have them, but I mean, you must admit, we've all got problems of space. I have huge problems of space for comics. I'm sure we will always have some form of print, but print's going to become something where it's either a very deluxe thing or maybe a very cheap thing, but essentially the volume of comics now that's out there, and we need digital formats, digital platforms, online, on iPads, on your smartphone. One of the futures of comics, it's coming already in Korea in a big way, are internet comics, which are not, you've probably seen web comics, but these are much more. Their format is vertical and scrolling. They call them webtoons, and I've been studying this as part of my new book, and it's becoming a really big market. What you need for that is you need free Wi-Fi everywhere, and Korea has that. Here in Brazil you don't, in Britain we don't, but that's going to come. It's got to come because we need the internet all the time, and then the format is amazing because you're scrolling and it's vertical. And one of the ones I've seen just recently is amazing. As a new establishing shot appears, the image is actually in layers, so it has a kind of illusion of being in depth, like a depth effect. And then as you scroll, at certain points, if there's a gunshot or something, your phone will vibrate. Or if there's an explosion, of course, there are noises it can incorporate. But the crucial thing always with these comics is that you, the reader, the viewer, are actually in control. So it's as you move up, you introduce the things. It's not like an animated film where you just sit back and it just washes over you. You are actively deciding the pace of the story. And there's some really amazing work coming out of this. And what's amazing even more is that is reaching an adult audience that wasn't reading comics. Korea has had a very strange history of comics, and only as recently as the 90s, they had public burnings of comics. They were seen to be as bad as alcohol and sex. They were thought to be a really bad thing for young people. So to have this change in only maybe 20 years or so, to have adults embracing comics in this new format, reading them on the trains, on their way to work. 10 million Koreans every day download their favorite episodes. That's a future for comics, I think. One of the futures.
If you can let a message for our viewers that are readers and people that are interested in knowing a bit more of comic books, what would you say for these people? What would you let as a message from you to our viewers?
Well, my message would mostly be to not buy another issue of a comic that you're not really enjoying anymore, but you buy because you've always bought it. And we've all done this, where we've gone, I've got to keep on buying this series. And the main thing is to explore, to keep an open mind and to explore and try comics that you maybe have never tried. You can obviously try them online or get them out of your public library or borrow them from a friend, but don't ever get bored with comics. I've met some of my friends, you get to a certain point and you say, I've read all the same stories, it's all very boring and this story's never going to end or whatever, because there's such quality and variety out there to discover. And that would be my message, is to keep an open mind and keep trying things you haven't tried before.
Thank you very, very much.
You're welcome.